Welcome along to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staton, Robbie Williams, Adam Nathan with you here. And it is scheduled release day. So we're going to know in about an hour and a half who the Seahawks are playing and when, where, and all of that stuff. Loads of things have been leaked already. I don't really know why we have to wait till, 1 o'clock in the morning over here to confirm most of this stuff. But we've kind of got an idea where the Seahawks are going to be. I think I've seen that they're probably going to be at home on the opening day against the Rams is sort of one of the headlines there, which would be a great start, great chance to start the season with a win. So, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some general Seahawks topics. We will take it through to when that release is going to take place, and then we'll give our reaction, and then I'm going to go to bed. So, because it's a very late start for this schedule release. But I'm hoping that Dave Softy Marlowe is correct, that there is a Thanksgiving Day game for the Seahawks against the Niners, because I am waiting. I've got a hotel booked, which I can cancel if needs be. Just waiting to book those flights to get over there if that game is confirmed. So fancy a bit of that, fancy a bit of Apple Cup that weekend as well. Could be a great week. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today, guys, is nothing schedule related. It's just a general thought on the team. We've talked about the draft class and where it's left the Seahawks and kind of the position they're in. Robbie, I just was thinking today when it was announced that Jackson Smith-Njigba has signed his rookie contract, 6 of the 10 rookies have signed their contracts now. This offense just looks stacked. It looks like a really stacked offense. There's so much firepower there for Geno Smith, and that has to be a real positive thing right now.
Yeah, I really like our offense. It's and that running back room is stacked as well. I mean, you start looking around and you think, man, how our team's gonna plan to stop this offense? I mean, really, it's gonna fall on. I mean, we've given Geno every reason to succeed this year. I mean, we've got, possibly a new center. Well, we're gonna have a new center either way. It's either Evan Browner or Double O guy, Ola or whatever from Michigan. It's going to be, the new starting center. You got Anthony Bradford with a chance to start, a young, hungry offensive line. You've got depth at the running back position now. Kenny McIntosh. You and I were just talking about it off air, and man, how good he really is for a 7th round pick is kind of a steal. And then, our wide receivers, it's great. I mean, even our tight ends, this is a really fun offense, and I can't wait to see him get going on it.
Yeah, I've just done an interview with Jim Nagy, the head of the Senior Bowl, and that's going to drop tomorrow. And we both shared a moment on how the hell did Kenny McIntosh last to round 7. It's incredible. Seahawks offense looks great. I mean, there may be 1 or 2 things I want to talk about the defense as well, which may be slightly less positive based on the interview that Pete Carroll had earlier today that I want to ask you guys about. But Adam, that offense does look really good. I mean, if you're Geno Smith facing a prove-it year with a contract that's heavily incentivized, having to prove that you warrant earning a minimum of $31.2 million next year, you couldn't ask for any more, really, could you? I know people I'm already seeing in the comments, the interior O-line and stuff like that. But, the Seahawks have made 2 picks there. They have signed guys that I think people feel, the veteran center that they signed, I think people are kind of okay with. So it's not like they've done absolutely nothing there. They did have Steve Hutchinson looking at centers to find out who was the best fit. So they have done a bit of work. They've made some picks. Not every player can be a high pick, Adam. I think the offense generally, when you look at the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs, there's so much weaponry there, isn't there? There aren't many teams that can boast these kind of options.
No, I think it's great. And, some of my complaints in the last 5 or 6 years, well, the first one would be that I don't think they've ever, since the second Super Bowl team, have they really been competitors? Seahawks fans have loved to say this and that about the talent we've got. And, we've got this player and this player, but they've been chasing their tail really when it comes to drafting and free agency ever since then. And I don't think any of us would truly hand on heart say, this team were unlucky not to get back to championship games or to win another Super Bowl since 2015. And I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I think my overriding thoughts on the draft are that one of those sort of big sand timers that you have, like Aladdin got trapped in, has just been turned over. and it's 4 years from now. And I think that this is a real window that the Seahawks have for the first time in a long time. There's talent all over the place and potential high-end talent. You look at these NFL top 100 lists, which don't matter in the general scheme of things, but there haven't been that many Seahawk players on those recently. And it is a star-driven league, I think, at the top end. And it's so exciting that even with someone like Witherspoon, who, wasn't necessarily a consensus pick going into it, he's a potential star. Jackson Smith and Jigba, potential star. Even Zach Charbonnet, all talk about him. There's a potential star element here. And I have no issue with the fact that they've left a few positions unfilled in this draft, because they've gone star hunting as far as I'm concerned. And they've put themselves in a position where year one of a 2-year proper squad rebuild is now underway. And yeah, as I say, I'm not sure it's going to happen this year, but I think if they have another draft and off season next year like they have this, they have a 3-year window where the sky's the limit as far as I can tell. And that's exciting for the first time in a long time.
And when you actually look at the draft classes, Robbie, from this year and last year, the one thing that they did very well back in the day, from 2010 onwards, was find those starters in day 3 and people who could really contribute and have a big impact. And you look at last year, Tariq Woolen having the kind of impact he did as a 5th rounder, Abraham Lucas as a 3rd rounder, is a starting right tackle that everybody feels is the future at the right tackle position. Kobe Bryant played a lot of snaps as a rookie. I'm speaking to Jim Nagy today. He says he's really intrigued to see what Tyreek Smith can do, adding into that rotation at the pass rush, because he was kind of just a write-off last year, but he's going to be back. Derek Young, they speak very highly of Derek Young in the 7th round. And then this year, it's not going to be a surprise, Robbie, if their 4th round nose tackle plays a whole bunch of snaps next year and plays a big contributing role. Oluwatimi could be a starting center in the 5th round. Kenny McIntosh can do a job for you. Jarek Reed, a lot of people like Jarek Reed. I had a 4th round grade on Jarek Reed. They got him in the 6th round. And Mike Morris, there's just something about Mike Morris that he fell to the 5th round because of his testing. And the tape's inconsistent, but there's talent there, Robbie. Would it be a complete shocker if in a couple of years' time, Mike Morris ends up being a fairly decent rotational player for a 5th round pick at the very least? No, I think it's a good chance of that. So that's what they needed to get back to. Yeah, we want to see them hit, and they hit on Kenneth Walker. They hit on Abe Lucas, as we mentioned. We hope that Boya Mafe is going to take a step forward. I think Charles Cross needs to really improve this year to show that, yes, I am a top 10 pick, but he's capable of that. This year, you kind of expect big things from Witherspoon, Smith and Jigba. But it's those guys in the day 3 range, Robbie, in the middle rounds. If you can get them in there contributing, it's a big thing. That's how you build a team.
Yeah, not even just that. Some of these undrafted free agents, and you and I talked and all 3 of us had chatted just kind of like on Messenger, just chatting with each other. And Robert Cooper's a player that people should keep an eye on as well. And he went undrafted D-line from Florida or Florida State. And I mean, he's a bad dude. I mean, he's taken on double teams and he's a good run stuffer. I think he's going to be a good rotational player. There's another guy that's going to come in and probably play significant snaps as well. And I think there's a good chance that is it Jake Lobin or Lobo or whatever his name is, the wide receiver from UCLA. It's another guy that has an opportunity to come in and maybe not take significant snaps away from the starting 3, but I mean, make a name for himself on the roster, pushing guys out that you would think could stick around, like D. Eskridge. Like this is a make or break year for him, I think. I mean, there's a good chance he might not even make the squad. So there's a lot of things that you could look at some of these draft picks and think, not only can they come in and play significant snaps, but could be, potential game wreckers for you and make some big plays. So I'm really excited about the draft. I mean, the more I go back and watch it, especially some of that Kenny McIntosh, I touched just seeing his fiery and how emotional he was and just like how great it was. All of this just fun, man. And I'm really excited to see these guys play and feel lucky that they're on our team.
If anyone has a question, I've seen a couple of questions going in. Super chat them in, and we will get to those as soon as possible. And we are going to talk about some of those questions. Jake Bobo is the player that you're looking for, Robbie. It's a crazy name.
Yeah, Bobo.
You just don't have that kind of a second name in England. You just don't have a guy called Jake Bobo. That is a very American name going on there. But interesting that John Schneider singled him out, and we liked him a lot on the blog. Adam, the thing that and Mario Edwards is signed today, so it's another defensive lineman. I think the one thing that just worried me a little bit, I did mention this, is listening to Carroll on Seattle Sports 710 today, and they were asking him about the scheme, and to put it bluntly, it sounded a bit of a jumbled mess. And I know that people will react and say, "Oh, it's just a hybrid." Everybody's using hybrid systems. It's not that much of a jumbled mess. It's just what it is. When I hear Carroll going, we're going to run a bit of 3-4 and a bit of 4-3, and we're going to do a bit of one gap, and we're going to do a bit of two gap in, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. I kind of think, Adam, isn't this how you confuse younger players? Isn't this how you try a bit of everything and then spend 6 weeks working out what's best for your crew? And isn't this how the Seahawks have got themselves into trouble in the past, where they've started the season and they do have to work out things on defense? That we have the famous Carroll quote of, we just need to do this, we just need to do that. We're going to get it right. We're going to take a turn, and then, do you know what? They maybe do take a turn, but you're halfway through the season. And then, as we saw last year, it can regress again. That's what worries me a little bit. I would kind of take a bit of predictability at this point for better execution, if that makes sense. Do we really need to? Maybe we're trying to confuse opponents with these different looks and these hybrid looks. Is there a danger that the Seahawks will confuse themselves even more?
I think you're completely right. And ultimately, on a bigger picture standpoint, I think what I was saying about this 3 to 4 year window that I think we're now in, there's no hiding places for anyone. And I think that's from the top down now. Pete and John, to an extent, have probably had a number of excuses that you could lean on in the last few years of, maybe not enough talent here, or, the quarterback situation hasn't been exactly as we wanted, but they've pretty much curated a team in the last 2 years in exactly the image that they want. And they've said as much I think Pete said today something about, for the first time in a while, it feels like we've really molded what we wanted. And I don't think these excuses are going to wash if in week 6 it's a bottom 5 defense again in a particular element, because they've had every opportunity to not let that happen. Now, if they're weak rushing the passer because they've taken Devin Witherspoon instead of Tyree Wilson, I can tolerate that, because I can see that as a position they can fill next year. And I don't mind that, because they've shot for the stars in Witherspoon, and I have complete respect for that. But if there's a schematic thing and players look confused like they did last year, and they're getting gashed for 250 yards by team after team because of a scheme thing, I don't think we need to tolerate that. And people have made a lot of excuses for Pete and John, and ultimately, I think both of them are lucky to still be in jobs after the way the last 5 or 6 years have panned out with the expectation. But they're here, and things appear to be going in the direction that we want them to be. But there's no hiding places now, and so if there is a schematic thing, you'll have every right to call it out, and I think people will, and I hope there'll be a bit less patience for that, because it's go time.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think there are some questions still, and I think it's fine to sort of raise some of these questions, especially around the quarterback position. Geno Smith has got every opportunity to succeed this year, Robbie, hasn't he? But that's all the more important that he does deliver now. If he goes out there and has a very average season, or I don't know, just doesn't look like the answer, then they're going to have a big question mark next year. And this is something we'll come on to a little bit again. But that's a bit of a problem for the team, isn't it? They don't have any long-term security. And I think the problem with these incentives, I think it's a great contract. I'm not criticizing the contract. I think the Seahawks did absolutely the right thing in this contract structure, Robbie. But it is so easy for him to hit some of those incentives and almost screw himself in the process. If he throws 30 touchdowns but throws 18 interceptions, for example, it's not beyond the realms of possibility of his turnover-worthy plays from last year. You then have to wonder, well, yeah, the 30 are great, the touchdowns are great, but that's a lot of turnovers, relatively speaking. But he's made $2 million for that. So then it goes up to 33.2. The Seahawks he could be average, and the Seahawks could win 9 games, and that's another $2 million that he gets. So suddenly he's 35.2 million. And then the Seahawks are looking at this going, do we want to pay this guy $35 million for this level of performance? He really has to sort of show out, Robbie, with the talent that he's got, to say, I'm the man. Now, fingers crossed he's going to do that. And we all on this stream, just because we're talking about it, not many other people are, it doesn't mean that we don't 100% want him to succeed. We do. I'm desperate for him to succeed. I'm desperately hoping that Dave Marler's going to be right, that I'm going to Thanksgiving in Seattle this year towards the end of the season, and the Seahawks are beating the Niners that night to virtually clinch the NFC West. That's what I would love nothing more to see, Robbie. Desperate for that to happen. But it's okay to accept the situation the Seahawks are in, and that could put pressure on the team. I think they've had 2 A+ drafts, absolutely knocked it out of the park. But unless you fix that issue for the long term, Robbie, or you have somebody who, at least for the next 4 or 5 years, can max out the talent that you're adding elsewhere, then it will become a bit of an issue. And they don't have forever. They're not going to have 5-6 years here to find an answer. As the Colts have found out, things can turn sour very, very quickly if you have a good roster, but a bad quarterback situation or a short-term quarterback situation.
Well, I'm glad you said the Colts, because that was the first thing that came to mind when you were talking. And I was like, well, we could quickly turn into the Colts with a great roster and everything in place, but that quarterback position, I think we're still a few pieces away. But yeah, I think the chips are on the table for Geno to really make a significant amount of money this year, and he's got to play really well. And I could see a scenario where we're in this, but I could also see a scenario where we're 9-8 like last year, and we lost a couple of close ones. So. I think Tom says right. 35 million seems like the middle class right now, and I think middle class for QBs, and I think that's probably pretty close, and I think that's where he stands. But with that being said, maybe he comes out and lights it up, and we're all hoping for it. We want to see this team succeed. We want to see them compete and get a chance to get another Super Bowl. So. I think we're doing all the right things. We're putting all the right players in the right spots. I think this is we have it, like Adam was saying, it's a fun time to be a Seahawks fan, because you finally got people that you can finally get behind, and it's not like just Russell Wilson. You know what I mean? Like, there's more players that you're excited about than just like an aging Bobby and Russell Wilson. You get to see some players that you're gonna genuinely are rooting for again. Not that you were never rooting for him prior, but like you actually have some superstar potential now.
There's a freshness to it, isn't there? There's new names, there's new stars, there's some old ones as well that were back, but it just feels intriguing in a way that maybe, I think we all felt this. I certainly felt it. It got a bit stale towards the end of the Wilson era. It felt like something had to give. Either he needed to move on, or the coaches needed to move on. There needed to be something, and they traded him, and they've used that stock, I think, well. It would have been ideal to get a young quarterback. I think John Schneider would admit that, who you can build around for the long, long term, but they haven't. It doesn't matter. They've got a lot of good players elsewhere. They've got a good, talented young roster, which I'm excited to watch. And I think probably in 2021, I wasn't that excited to watch the Seahawks. And now I am excited to see week 1 again. I'm counting down the days already, even though it's only the 11th of May. It's going to be a long summer waiting for those games. What I did want to ask about is Mario Edwards Jr. is signed, Adam. He's signed today as a player. They had him for a workout a few weeks ago. He is a big 3-4 defensive end type. So it's another player in that kind of a mold. What do you make of that news? Because I think 1 or 2 people are saying, yeah, that's fine. It's good to have another defensive lineman. But the one thing the Seahawks don't really have is that, apart from Cameron Young, is that big Al Woods-sized body up the middle. And as much as they're going to talk about Cam Young's, as 304-pound nose tackle, he can do that job. And as much as I share Robbie's enthusiasm for the undrafted free agents and that maybe they can find a nose tackle there, when a team has been as bad, Adam, as it has against the run, you can understand why there are some concerns there.
Totally. But Al Woods seems like one that they didn't expect to be signed by someone else. Maybe I'm misreading that, but it just seemed like the Al Woods situation, kind of the general view of the fans was similar to the team. It was like, oh yeah, well, Al Woods will sign in kind of mid-June, get him back in, and have a nice little press release about that with a few funny videos of just the mammoth size of the man, and then we'll be good to go. So I wonder if that one kind of had them chasing their tail a little bit. But overall, yeah, there are concerns. But your site is called The Rebuild, and no one took that seriously last year. They say, oh, no, it's not a rebuild. I think it's safe to say that if you look at the way they've drafted this year in particular, for me, that suggests that they realized there was more of an issue with this roster than just a one-off season turnaround. This can't be done in 1 year. And there's no negative behind that. Most teams take a couple of years to actually get good again. And if anything, I respect the fact they've said, look, we're just going to go star hunting right now, and it's going to be a 2-year process. And that is going to leave you with holes here and there. And I think all you can really do is just try and fill that with the best 1-year player you can, so that you're not carrying anything over into next year, and you can make it a 2-year process. So I'm not worried about the defensive line positions that much, because I don't expect this to be the year where all the chips need to be pushed in, like it has felt in the last 5 or 6 years, where, oh my God, if we don't do it this year, we're screwed for next year because of X, Y, Z. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm concerned about it. And as a result, I'm fairly pleased they filled the position, but it's not the kind of thing that's keeping me up at night, because I just think there are bound to be holes when you take on a 2-year process, which is what I think they're doing.
Completely agree. And I understand why Carroll's not keen on the word the rebuild or rebuild, and why he pushes back on it. And I understand why some fans kind of, every now and again I get a message like, you should change the name of your podcast because he says it's not a rebuild. It's like, well, come on. I mean, who cares? Like, they've spent the last 2 years spending a whole boatload of pigs rebuilding the roster. And like, nobody could watch that 2021 season and think, well, this is a team that's just on the brink. It needs a tweak here and a tweak there, and they're destined for the top. They've and neither did they really look like that last year. We're getting to a point now where I don't think they're going to. I've already seen people saying, hey, maybe they're this close. And one thing I want to ask you guys in a bit is where you sort of see the Seahawks in the NFC picture right now, the NFC West and the NFC. I've seen people talking about, well, they could maybe push for the Super Bowl and stuff like that. I think it's a year too early. But the great thing is I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. And I think it's a cause for excitement to actually think, hey, maybe in 2024, that could be realistic. That could be something that actually happens rather than it being a pipe dream. And that's fine, isn't it, Robbie? It's okay to be sort of working towards a goal. Very few teams, as Adam says, go from where the Seahawks were in 2021 to a Super Bowl contender the next year. It takes a bit of time. And we've seen the Eagles go from, what was it, something like 4 wins to 7 wins to Super Bowl. Or, the numbers are wrong. I'm just paraphrasing a little bit there, to what they were. But they made a rapid improvement. And I think that maybe next year we could look at the Seahawks as somebody who could be in that kind of range. But I think they need another draft, Robbie, and another free agency just to put the finishing touches to this. And with, first round pick, second round pick, and 2 third-round picks next year, they will have the opportunity to do that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, if you want to go to that super chat, I can play off kind of the super chat, the question that was asked here.
Well, this one.
Yeah, who's the worst team in the league? And I think there's 2 teams in the NFC West that are the worst teams in the league. I think it's the Rams and the Cardinals. I think it's easy. I mean, you could maybe throw the Titans in there as well. But for me, it's the Rams and the Cardinals, and I think we have a chance to compete with the Niners this year. And I would not have said that last year. And I think this year we have a much better chance to compete with the Niners. I think they're still the class of the NFC West, and if we have an opportunity to overtake them, and I've seen the magic at Lumen Field. That you get a couple home games and magic happens. So if I just like it. If you get in the dance, you got a chance. And I think if they can get there, I think that's probably the direction I see them going. Is either being able to win the NFC West or getting in wild card. It's going to be. I mean, that's really good for the young guys. Getting a chance to play in the postseason. But then, like you said, next year's draft, we have got 2/3, a second, and a first, an opportunity to continue to build on that. I think next year would be more likely to be on that hunt for the Super Bowl. But I mean, I'm not saying there's not a chance this year, but I think we're probably right. It's a year too early.
I'm going to try and find the odds for the NFC to win the Super Bowl. I'll put them on the screen, and we'll talk about this in a bit more detail next. But Adam, who is your worst team in the league prediction this year?
I mean, the Cardinals are almost trying to be the worst team in the league by the looks of things, the way in which they're doing things. The Texans have had to do so much work that I think they're going to struggle to be particularly competitive. And I think the Patriots are going to be terrible as well, to be honest. I mean, I know they've obviously got, the coach of a generation, but I don't think Mac Jones is up to it. And I'm not particularly convinced that even they think that, but given the situation they were in, they were sort of stuck with what they had. But, with the division they're in, if Tua stays healthy, and they could very easily go 0-6 in their division, and it's pretty tough to recover from there. So it's funny with the NFC, and I guess we'll talk about it. But yes, the way the NFC is structured right now means that the Seahawks could be competitive, and ultimately all you can do is just beat the teams that are in front of you. But I don't know if that's enough, really, when you're trying to build a team to say, well, our conference is bad, therefore it doesn't matter as much. I think the aspiration should be, we need to be as good as the Eagles, the Niners, and the Bengals and Chiefs, as opposed to, well, if Hurts gets injured, we might be able to sneak in. I'd like us to be more long-term and realistic than that, as opposed to we need a bit of, a couple of drop-offs and we could be in, because the NFC can quickly turn itself around. And if you just bank on a low-quality conference, then you'll soon find yourself chasing your tail, I think.
So thank you, Taker610, for your question and your super chat. Much appreciated. If you have a super chat, send them in. My answer to who is the worst team in the league this year is 49ers. Knobs. Moving on. Let's have a look at the odds. We'll do this now. I'm going to bring the odds up. So this is Odds Checker NFC odds for making the Super Bowl. The San Francisco 49ers are at the top of the list. And then the Dallas Cowboys are second. Where are the Eagles in this? Right at the top. Sorry, I just went down too far. So the Eagles are the favourites. And then the Niners, the Cowboys, the Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, Saints, and Seahawks. So a quick thought on this. Robbie, are you buying the Niners as second favourites? Because although they've been very good, although Kyle Shanahan has shown what a master he is at he could practically take one of us three and turn us into a competent quarterback. But there's Brock Purdy's injury. They're basically shopping Trey Lance already. And Sam Darnold's in. It's another quarterback in there. Sam Darnold's in there. Are they still the power that they are? Everyone's a year older. They've signed Javon Hargrave. Obviously, that's a big signing. That defensive line is going to be as good as always. But they have lost one or two players in the secondary. And although Christian McCaffrey stayed very healthy last season, that's not been his career so far to date, has it? So, and the same for George Kittle. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd put the Niners at second. I think that's probably where I would put them. I think actually Sam Darnold fits perfect for Kyle Shanahan. I think that's just a great fitting there for them. But I don't know how long Brock Purdy's injury is going to last with that shoulder injury, or elbow or whatever it is. But I'm not really sure. I think they're still going to be a tough team. Their defense is still stout. I know they've lost some players, but I still feel like they're going to be a tough out. I don't think they're an easy win by any means. But if you look at the rest of them, I'm not buying the Cowboys. I think the Lions could be tough this year.
Steady on, because we'll run through them. We'll go through them one by one.
Okay. Yeah, but just with that saying, I'll just say go back to the Niners. Like, I do feel like that's a team that will compete. I think they're probably the favorite for the NFC West.
Adam, Dallas, how the hell are Dallas third? Is this indicative of just a bit of a crap NFC? Because the last time we saw Dallas, Dak Prescott looked dire. They look a lot less potent than they have done. Brian Schottenheimer's the offensive coordinator now. And although defensively Micah Parsons is very, very good, I'm not sure that there's a collection of players there who are perhaps living off past reputation. And even Trevon Diggs came back down to earth with a bit of a bang last year. So, why are the Cowboys the third? Is it just because they're Dallas? What's the justification there, do you think?
I would suppose that I mean, obviously it's odds makers, so they're only going off people's hunches, really. But if you had to say to me that if every team was to catch fire, then perhaps of the chasing pack, Dallas would be harder to stop than the rest. If Prescott, Lamb, Pollard, Amari Cooper still there, or is he at the?
He went to the Browns.
He went to the Browns. But they do have that sort of star power that is quite alluring. Certainly, when no one's seen anyone play for 4 or 5 months, and it's like that thing where when a football player is injured, every week they're injured, they get better and better in your mind. I think maybe the Cowboys are a team like that. That when you're listing out the players they've got, you go, oh wow, if they click, then they could be great. But I think it's much of a muchness after those top two. You're probably overthinking it to suggest that anyone outside of the Eagles and the 49ers are the best team in the NFC right now. And I suppose someone has to be third. I certainly wouldn't have a few of those teams in there that are above Seattle where they are, but it doesn't stun me that Dallas are kind of the bookies front runners outside of that top two.
I wouldn't have Dallas ahead of the New York Giants, and the New York Giants are midway down the list. I just don't. The Cowboys, when they were at the best, they did have Amari Cooper, they did have CeeDee Lamb, they had Zeke, they had Pollard, they had tight ends, Schultz, who was there. They had a lot of firepower. You could look at that Prescott and you thought, yeah, do you know what? You can win you an important game. Dak just looks like Dak's starting to look to me like, when Russell Wilson just took a bit of a turn and you start to think, have the injuries caught up? Is he on the downward trend now? Is the trajectory heading downwards? And at the end of last season, I was thinking that with Dak. Zeke's gone, busted flush. Pollard's coming off an injury. The tight end's gone. He's gone to Houston. Amari Cooper went last year to Cleveland. They brought in Brandon Cooks, but Brandon Cooks has had about 70 concussions in the last however many years. Is he going to be durable? They just look a lot less potent to me. And I was a bit surprised that they just sort of sat there and took Marzi Smith. I would have thought maybe Dallas would have been a bit more aggressive there to get some weaponry. And I don't know whether Kellen Moore's a good offensive play caller or not. He seemed to get another job pretty quickly. But we know what Brian Schottenheimer is like. And is that, if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, are you excited about Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer running your offense this year? I just don't. I'm not buying Dallas as the third highest team. I don't know if it's an odds checker thing, but I'm not having that. Robbie, Detroit. They are the trendiest team in the NFL right now. Everybody has gone nuts for Detroit. But the thing is I think they just had one of the weirdest drafts where they just traded down and they traded away from Bijan Robinson to take Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th overall pick. They then take the linebacker from Iowa at 18, both huge reaches in my opinion. I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't like the linebacker, but 12 overall for Jahmyr Gibbs. You haven't, been serious with that? When you could have just, if you're that desperate for a running back, just take Bijan Robinson at 6. I don't trade down and take Jahmyr Gibbs. And then the linebacker there. I don't understand, Robbie, why off the back of a really head-scratching draft, people are so high on Detroit. They finished the year very strongly last year. I get that. But they've lost their touchdown machine at running back. And they're still a team led by Jared Goff. And they've got a lot of their key players have had injuries, Robbie.
Yeah, I expect that defense to take a step forward this year, even more than they did last year. I think that's probably why. They've got a pretty solid defense there. And, I mean, their first round was so bizarre, their draft. But I actually quite liked what they did after that. But their first round was weird. But they were real hyped about Gibbs, so maybe they know something we don't. But, I mean, and then to turn around and trade Swift like that, I'm not really sure. I'm kind of want to believe the hype a little bit. I mean, again, it's Jared Goff, but he did lead the Niners. But again, that was in, the Kyle Shanahan offense. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I said I meant the Rams and the McVay offense. But I think the division's probably theirs for the taking if they want it. I think if that defense can continue to improve and the offense can keep clicking like it did last year, I think they have an opportunity.
And I guess, Adam, that pays into Minnesota, who are just behind them. And people are quite rightly saying in the comments there that this is a lot about the fact that Green Bay are going to expect it to fall away because Aaron Rodgers is no more. But I'm unconvinced by the Vikings. The Vikings seem like a massive paper tiger to me, Adam, that they are somebody who, on any given day, they can click and they could beat most teams at home. And obviously, they've got one of the best wide receivers in the league. But they've also, Adam Thielen's no more. They are going to be relying on a rookie number 2 receiver who I wasn't that blown away by, quite frankly, at USC. They are trying to get rid of Dalvin Cook. They're trying to move him on. It looks like he's not for long there. So you take him out of the equation as well. And defensively, they were a mess last year. So I don't really know, again, what there is to be too positive about that. And Kirk Cousins is still Kirk Cousins, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, my biggest worry about the Lions is that some of their players are watching this stream on the way to work and see them at 9-1 and start lumping on. They lose another 6 players for half the season for gambling on the job, which there you go. Had to get that in. The Vikings, if there was a version of us, an alternative universe, and we were Vikings fans instead of Seahawks fans, I think I probably would have got this blog sort of kicked off YouTube with far too much foul language, because my biggest fear is that the Seahawks with Geno Smith end up just becoming a glorified version of the Vikings, where everyone keeps telling themselves that they're in great shape, but they're just not. And, every year is their year. Even more than Dallas, the hype they get. How many times do they have a big first game of the season? They might beat the Packers at home and say, oh, this is the Vikings year. But then ultimately, Kirk Cousins is always going to be Kirk Cousins. And people get very offended by that. Oh, he can't do it in prime time. Yes, he can. Look at that one game he did. But Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. And my ultimate fear for the Seahawks is that that's the situation they could end up in with Geno Smith, that you end up trying to convince yourself over and over again that he is a guy that he isn't. And I would be so disappointed if I was a Vikings fan, because they've basically just been a souped up version of Jeff Fisher's Rams for the last 6 or 7 years. And what's the point?
Yeah, completely agree. And then, so the one other team that's ahead of Seattle in this list, at least, is the New Orleans Saints. And look, Robbie, I don't want to be a homer, and I kind of said I think the Seahawks are a year away. But the kind of the broader point, the reason I want to run through all these teams is I don't think the Seahawks are necessarily worse than the Saints, the Vikings, the Lions, or the Cowboys. I think I can understand why the Lions get a lot of love, and maybe they are just poised to make a bit of a run at this, and perhaps they are. But I don't know how you can put the Saints ahead of Seattle just because they've got Derek Carr, Robbie. I know that Derek Carr sliced and diced Seattle last year when he was with the Raiders, but Seattle's defense was feeling particularly generous that day. I just don't feel like the Sean Payton-less version of the Saints are that threatening for me. And a lot of their key players, the big names, when you think of the Saints, what do you think of? Cam Jordan, he's very old now. Breeze, retired. Michael Thomas, practically been retired for a couple of years, still clinging on. Alvin Kamara looks like he's a nightmare off the field. They just look like a team that's dodging a transition, a team that's needed to accept its fate for a number of years, but just keeps borrowing more and more on the credit card every single year, the Saints. And it feels like an explosion or an implosion is coming. It's just when is it going to come? Is it going to be now with Derek Carr? Or are we still 2 or 3 years away from that?
Yeah, I don't understand why they're ahead of a lot of these teams. I mean, Derek Carr might settle the offense down a little bit, but I mean, you still have Alvin Kamara, who's probably going to get suspended for 6 to 8 games of the season. I don't think that. I mean, I think the defensive line is still probably pretty good in New Orleans. And you say, that. Derek Carr sliced and diced the Seahawks. I think you say the same thing. I think it's more of the fact that, we couldn't stop Josh Jacobs more than Derek Carr. But I don't understand that they just seem like a team that's like they've got they got a couple good possession receivers, but I don't get it. Like there's nothing about them that tells me that they're like the 5th or 6th best team in the NFC. Doesn't make any sense to me.
So if I was doing this list, and look, again, people feel free to call me a homer if you want. I don't think anybody who's followed the blog or this channel for the last 5 years would ever sort of lurch towards that conclusion. But I think the Giants and the Seahawks are you can put them in either order. I think they're the two after the Eagles and the 49ers for me. I just think the Giants showed quite a lot last year under Brian Daboll, and they won a playoff game. I think that they are a team that won't necessarily make too many waves in the playoffs. You don't expect them to be a Super Bowl contender, but they've kept everyone together and they've added to the team. So I don't really know why they're as low down as they are. They're going to be well coached. They're going to be well organized, and they're going to give teams some problems. And they beat the Vikings, didn't they? In the playoffs, they hammered them. So I don't see why they're that low on the list. And from Seattle, I just think the reason, Adam, that I would have Seattle higher is I think it's the offense. Seattle's offense has just got so many weapons. None of the teams in front, Dallas, Detroit, Minnesota, New Orleans, they haven't got three receivers like Seattle have. Look, obviously the Vikings have got Jefferson, elite player, but they haven't got three of those guys. The Detroit Lions have got a couple of good options, but they don't have three like Seattle. And one of them, as you've quite rightly joked, is serving his suspension for being on from one of those betting apps a bit too much. And then Dallas, as we've talked about, they've taken a step back in terms of their playmakers. I just think Seattle's got so many weapons on there. Geno Smith, whatever we think of Geno Smith, I think he's better than Derek Carr. I think it's a wash with Cousins. They basically had the same PFF grade last year. I think it's probably a wash with Jared Goff. And I think Prescott, as I've said, is on the downturn. I think he's got a lot to prove this year. So I think offensively, they're ahead of those teams. And I think all of those teams have question marks defensively. Detroit, yeah, they've got some good options, but they gave up a lot of yards, a lot of plays last year. The Vikings defense was a mess. The Saints are scrambling around trying to get their defense back on track. Adam, is it too optimistic to think, hang on a minute, for me, it goes Eagles, Niners, and then you can decide, toss a coin. Giants and Seahawks for me are 3 and 4, and you can put them in either order.
I suppose for both of those, it's what version of Geno Smith and what version of Daniel Jones both teams are going to see. Something that I've been thinking about a lot is if the Niners picked up a quarterback who was in his 10th year, and for the previous 9 years, he'd been not much more than a meme. And then the first half of the season, he was really good. And the second half of the season, he was really bang average. I would imagine we'd be sat here joking about, well, he had his time in the sun. The tape is out. All the defensive coordinators have found him out now, and he is back to what he is. And I can't shake that feeling when it comes to Geno Smith. But equally, with all of the sort of benefit of the doubt that I'm willing to give Pete and John on their draft, I think we have to go into this season suggesting or thinking that they have full faith in Geno and going along with it, because they've had every opportunity this offseason to go and get someone else. And they've resolutely stuck with what they wanted to do. They could very easily have traded up and got any of the quarterbacks available there, but they've not done that. They've gone in a different direction. So Geno has to be good for the Seahawks' sake, and he has to be good for Pete and John's sake, because they've kind of put all of their eggs of this team in his basket. Because if he isn't good, all of that optimism about what they may have done in the draft could peter out. And I similarly think it's kind of the same with Daniel Jones, who for me has been paid a lot for one good year under Daboll, which quite possibly that extrapolates for the rest of his career. But those two, I would say that whilst they probably have the best roster and coaching situation out of the others, I wouldn't want to put too much money on either of those quarterbacks to necessarily thrive and take those teams forward, which is ironic because those are probably the two that now have the most invested in them, either financially or faith-wise from the team.
We're going to talk a bit about quarterbacks here, and Adam raised a question in our little DM group, which I'm going to bring to the table in a second. I think looking at this list, this is one of the reasons why I really hope that they can find, and again, this is no disrespect to Geno Smith. I hope he is the guy. I hope he goes on and proves that. And I've shown, I did a video when he played better than I expected in the first half of last season, and I'll do it again. If he leads Seattle to a Super Bowl, I'll happily say, look, I didn't expect that, and well done to him, and we'll all be celebrating. I'll probably be too drunk to even do that video because I'll be too happy that the Seahawks have won the Super Bowl. But I look at this list and I think, wow, if you had, think of prime year Russell Wilson or somebody, just a franchise quarterback, just somebody that everybody universally goes, that's a franchise quarterback, because there's quite a few of them in the AFC at the minute. Look at the run you could have in the NFC right now. Look at that, is wide open. And I get it. The Saints, the Vikings, the Lions, they'll all be saying the same thing. They'll all be saying, if we had the guy, then we could be up there. We could go toe to toe with the Eagles and the Niners and be way better than them. There is a window opening for a team to sort of own this conference for a while. But I do think the team that does it is gonna be the one that gets their Joe Burrow, that gets their Patrick Mahomes, that gets their Josh Allen. I think you are going to need that. Otherwise, there's always going to be that little bit of a question mark as to whether or not you can own this conference. So there we go. There's our thoughts on it. And if you're wondering what the bottom of the NFC is like, Arizona at the bottom, Tampa Bay next to them. I think that's probably a little. Look, Tampa Bay's quarterback situation's a mess, but I don't think they're worse than the Rams right now. And I think the Panthers are going to be a bit better than people think. I don't understand why the Bears are ahead of them, because they've got a lot of pieces there. But that's what the odds checker is saying in terms of the odds for making the Super Bowl in the NFC. So Adam raised this question. Robbie, I'm going to come to you with it first, even though Adam raised the question, saying that essentially every year we hear how John Schneider, he talks about how much he wants to draft quarterbacks, that it was always his intention to take one every year. And yet here we are. He joined the team in 2010. It's now 2023. They've had, I think, 14 drafts in total now, and they've drafted 2 quarterbacks. One of those was a 7th-round pick in Alex Magoo. The other one was Russell Wilson. He has done the opposite of drafting quarterbacks every year. And Adam succinctly put this as blah, blah, blah about how, when John Schneider talks about how he wants to take a quarterback every year, because that's essentially the results suggest that it is a load of blah, blah, blah. And then Adam says, maybe he just isn't as hot on the position as we all think. I've got an opinion on this. I'll ask Adam what his view is on it. But Robbie, first of all, what's your take on that question that he's posed?
Well, to be fair, on one of his draft picks, he did select Russell Wilson, which ended up being a hell of a pick, right? I mean, he was fabulous for us for quite some time, so he really didn't have to work because we had that franchise guy, so probably didn't have to put that much pressure on it. I also wonder how much Pete has an influence on that as well. I think, Pete has been more of the quarterback, is kind of, the point guard, and just does, make some good throws down the field, but just doesn't turn the ball over, and we run the rock, and that's what we do. I feel like maybe that Pete has that kind of influence on John Schneider. I'd be interested to know if it wasn't Pete there, if John would have taken the gamble of more quarterbacks. But I don't know. I think they're maybe he isn't as high on him, but I mean, he certainly showed this year that to hold his restraints and not go just picking somebody, but maybe he also feels like he's got enough in what he's seen out of Drew Lock and Geno Smith. So I don't know. He did hit it. He did hit it once, right? I mean, one of the two was going to be a Hall of Famer.
And that's the thing, I suppose, Adam, as well. One of the reasons why they haven't taken quarterbacks is because they had Russell Wilson. So they were never really going to feel the need to draft anybody. They've kind of liked the backups that they had when Wilson was there. But at the same time, it is interesting that they've had 2 drafts since trading Russell Wilson, and they didn't even take a flyer on somebody on day 3. My opinion on it is I think he is desperate to draft quarterbacks, but I think he's very, very careful on the players that he drafts, because I think he takes so much pride in that position. I think he wants to be known as someone who is good with quarterbacks. And I think if he feels like if he takes someone that's saying round 4 and they're cut, before camp or this time next year they're gone, he will see that as a blotch in his copybook. I actually think he's overly conservative with his quarterback picks because he doesn't want to be seen to have drafted a load that haven't worked out. I think he wants a record of, I draft a guy and they succeed and they stick in the league and they're a good player. I think he takes maybe even too much pride in that they're not taking flyers on players because John's not 100% sold on them. And I wonder if that's creeping into how he's valuing players at the top. Like, he liked Mahomes a lot. He liked Josh Allen a lot. And is he now sort of worried that, well, okay, now I've got to actually draft one. They better be as good as Mahomes or Allen. And therefore, what is he waiting for? Is he waiting for like the perfect quarterback to come and slap him in the face and say, take me? And and it does worry me a little bit that he is a bit too conservative, that he isn't taking enough shots, that they aren't bringing anybody in to develop. That could end up being a bit of an issue unless that player flops into his lap and they take him and they can develop him and work on him. So that's my take on it. What do you actually think, Adam? Because you posed the question.
Yeah, I genuinely posed it without actually having too much of a view on it. And I guess I've been forced to think about it since our little chat. And if you were playing sort of draft night bingo and John Schneider came up, Ron Wolf, take a quarterback every year, Green Bay Packers system would sort of be three things that you can tick within 5 minutes of the broadcast starting. So it's just interesting to me that he's come from a mentality clearly where we take quarterbacks, they work or they don't. And if they do, great. And if they don't, we'll take another one next year. And if it works or he doesn't, then we'll work on it. And perhaps it is just a case of when you don't do it for such a long time, you do get this cold feet and you chase this unicorn quarterback that may not manifest itself. But, if you told me, Adam, do you know what? I love ice cream. I absolutely love ice cream. And I took you to an ice cream parlor 14 times. And on 12 of them, you literally got to the desk and thought, no, I'm not going to have an ice cream. I would have to question how much you like ice cream. And I know that's a super reductive thing because you do have a massive tub of ice cream at home in the freezer that will last you for as long as you want it to. But it just seems a bit weird that we hear so much every year about how much, because of John Schneider's background, he loves quarterbacks and they just never take one. So perhaps the way you look at it is actually the best way, that he's almost got himself so wound up about what he needs to find to take one that he just doesn't want to do it anymore. But that's going to have to change at some point because they do have to find one for the future, you would think, in the next 2 to 3 years.
And the Green Bay thing is interesting because they, as you mentioned, they take shots. That was the Ron Wolf way, and how they did it was to just take. So, for example, they had Brett Favre, and they still draft Aaron Rodgers in the first round, and Brett Favre plays for 3 or 4 more years. And then in between drafting Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers actually becoming Aaron Rodgers, they drafted Brian Brome in the second round and brought in Matt Flynn and had a couple of guys to challenge Rodgers to be the answer for the future. So, and the fact that they wasted a second round pick on Brian Brome is neither here nor there because Aaron Rodgers worked out. But part of the thinking of actually getting the guy that works out is that you're prepared to take shot. I'll draft 6 guys. If I find one, that's all I need. And the Seahawks are now, my little bit of a fear, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. It might be completely wrong. My observation is that John, rather than taking 6 guys to find one, is trying to find one. Is trying to find, that's my guy. He's the next Patrick Mahomes. There we go. And is what they actually need somebody who they can go, we've got the perfect bridge in Geno Smith. He's 33 this year. He's not going to play forever as much as some fans want him to. Get somebody in who can sit for a couple of years now. Just accept that they're going to come in, they're going to be the backup, they're going to sit, they're going to learn. And do you know what? In the process of Geno Smith actually retiring or moving on or whatever, if you have to draft another one and chuck him into the mix as well and have a bit of a competition there, then so be it. I don't know how likely that is, though, Robbie. It does feel a little bit like they are being almost too careful at this position. I wonder if Ron Wolf, for example, would have gone, F it, I'm having Will Levis. And if it doesn't work out, who cares? Or, we'll take Hendon Hooker. Or, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I'll take him in round 4, whatever. Like, I'm going to have a guy if it kills me because I need to start looking. And if I look and don't find this year, we go again next year.
Yeah, I think it's different though when you've got, again, Pete said last year he thought he had two number 1 quarterbacks and he's got them back again this year. I think that it gives them kind of the freedom to not have to roll the dice on someone like that who may take up a roster spot, may not, and they may want maybe their cap space or whatever the case might be, that they're just looking to do what they think they need to do for the squad this year and then attack it next year. I was fully convinced they were taking a quarterback at 5, fully convinced. I thought that just was what they were going to do, and we were going to roll the dice there. But you know, I don't know. Maybe he didn't value the quarterbacks as highly as we thought, and from the sounds of it, there was only 2 players that they were taking at 5, and they were going to trade back. And I think we know who those 2 players are, and one of them was our quarterback. So maybe he doesn't value him as much, or maybe he just didn't like what he saw. I don't know.
Adam, this is always interesting for me. I brought this up with Jeff, and I want to bring it up here as well. I'm convinced the Packers thought the Seahawks might take, not that they definitely would, but they were worried the Seahawks might take Jordan Love. I think because of John Schneider, I think they spooked themselves in 2020 and thought, John's been talking about how much he was willing to draft Mahomes. John's been trying to trade Russell Wilson to get Josh Allen. And I was never a big Jordan Love fan, but a lot of people go, he's kind of like Mahomes. It's like, yeah, okay, everybody is these days. But people don't remember this. The Packers traded right above the Seahawks. And there was no reason to do that unless they felt like somebody else was moving up for Jordan Love. Now, maybe there was another team talking to the Miami Dolphins who were picking 26 overall, and the Packers just said, no, we're not letting anybody else have our guy. We're going to move up. We're going to do this. We're going to get him. But it wasn't just that they took Jordan Love that was so controversial. It's that they traded up to get him. And the only teams they traded above were the Tennessee Titans, who'd just given the new contract to Ryan Tannehill, who had just taken to the AFC Championship game. So the Titans at that point were not looking for the QB of the future. They traded above the Ravens, who'd got Lamar Jackson, who was 2 years into his career at that point, and just won the MVP, and the Seahawks. They're the only 3 teams that they traded above. So what reason was there to move up? Who was taking Jordan Love? Because the Ravens definitely weren't. The Titans definitely weren't. So the only answer can be is they either thought somebody else was going to move into that 26 spot and take their guy, so they wanted to be the team that traded up, or, Adam, they convinced themselves, we're worried about the Seahawks. They might take Jordan Love. I just think that's interesting. It's something that people never talk about. But I remember at the time thinking, why have the Packers traded above Seattle there? It made no sense. And I think they were worried about Seattle taking Jordan Love.
I heard you talk about that with Jeff, and it struck me as really interesting because I don't think it's something that's ever even been discussed in the Seahawk sort of on Twitter, or I'd never even heard that put forward as a thought. So it's interesting. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to the idea that, had Schneider drafted 6 quarterbacks in the previous 13 years, then what were they scared of? Because we don't take quarterbacks or don't appear to be interested in taking quarterbacks. So unless sort of his Green Bay, contacts and links, they'd been schmoozing and he fed some information back that gave someone the creeps. I don't know. It's one of those things that hopefully someone can answer the question for you in 15 years' time when someone's autobiography comes out. I mean, I hope that doesn't take up too many pages because there won't be a thriller second read. You wouldn't have thought if it is. But it's really interesting. I wonder who could be asked to find out these sorts of things.
I'd love to find out. I wish I knew somebody in Green Bay who I could just say, can you just ask that question? Just try and find out if they were worried about Seattle, or was it another team that was trying to get Jordan Love and they just got him instead? I just found it interesting. There's no real reason to trade above Seattle in that spot. So that's just my old thought there. The schedule release is 20 minutes away from finding out who the Seahawks are playing in week 1. The rumor is the Rams in Seattle, a rare season opener at home. The rumor is Detroit on the road in week 2, which would be a cracker. That'd be a very interesting game. But we're only 20 minutes away from finding out. I did want to ask you about a couple of things here. We've just got a super chat in from Stephen. I'm just going to jump to that. Stephen says, thanks guys. Love the content. Stephen, thank you very much for your super chat and your support. If you have any of those guys, if you appreciate the broadcast today, or if you have a question or anything and you want to chuck a super chat in, it is very much appreciated. We had a few articles. I did a video about this the other day. We had a few articles coming out revealing little things. And one of them was from Brady Henderson. I thought basically implying, Robbie, that the Seahawks were never really in the market for a quarterback. That's and he is connected. I think he is connected. I think he speaks to John Schneider. I'm just going to predict that. I don't know if it's true or not, but all of his stuff reads like he's very well connected to that front office, and that he maybe has someone's ear of significance like John Schneider. He basically was insinuating it was Anderson or Witherspoon all the way at number 5. Then we had the John Boyle article saying that Derek Hall was a first round grade on their board, which I think, whether you like the picks or not, if they genuinely had less than 20 legit first round grades, which is extremely likely because nobody did, to be able to get 3 at 5, 20, and 37, Robbie, of your actual legit, let's say they had 15 legit first round grades, just as a guess, to get 3 of them, that's a heck of a haul. That's a brilliant haul. So that was another good one. And then the other one was the Jalen Carter stuff from Tyler Dunn, which was the quote from a Seattle source was on whether they were going to take Jalen Carter. Hell no. And that it was never going to happen was the word. I wonder where I've heard that before. Anyway, some interesting stuff this week.
Yeah, I found those articles to be really interesting. I really enjoyed reading that and just kind of the whole draft process through like the time frames that he kind of checks down and just seeing where they're at. But the fact that they got 3 players that were on the had first round grades and their board, and you're right, probably 15 or to 20 first round grades on people. That's a major win, a major win for your team. And then I'm really interested. I don't know, maybe you figured it out, but I haven't figured out who the other 2 were that they had first round grades on that were available that had dropped. Do you know that one?
No, so the quote was in the article was that after Emmanuel Forbes had been taken at 16, there were still 4 players.
Yeah.
So obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba was one. Derek Hall was another because they've both been revealed to be first round grades. My guess was that one of them might be Christian Gonzalez because he was still available. I mean, he dropped more further than people were expecting. So I thought he might be one of them. And I did have an opinion on who the other one was, and I've completely forgotten. I mean, it could be Dalton Kincaid, potentially. I don't think it's Mayer because, I just didn't get that. I thought they would love Michael Mayer, and I got that projection wrong. I'll have to have a look and see, Robbie. I was wondering whether Gonzalez would be one, because I think quite a few teams would have Gonzalez in that range, and even though he fell a little bit, I don't think anybody feels he's a bad player. I think it's just that he just wasn't, that no one loved him. Like maybe a lot of teams liked him, but nobody loved him. I'm looking at the board now. Some people have suggested it could be Zay Flowers, that they maybe had that they were. I think Brock Heward's been talking about that they liked it was either Jackson Smith and Jigba or Zay Flowers. So that's another possible option there. I think based on traits, you could maybe say Miles Murphy, but he's one. Do you know what? Of all the things that we were talking about, Robbie and Adam, all the things like during the season, one of the things I'm most proud about is getting Miles Murphy right, because there was people at the end of the season like Matt Miller, who got so much wrong during this draft process, by the way.
He didn't get anything right.
I know there was an article on Walter Football about the fact that he got everything wrong. Like all of his source stuff was BS. But he came out after the season finished and went, hey, everyone's talking about Will Anderson and Tyree Wood. Keep an eye on Miles Murphy. He could be a top 5 pick. And it was like, well, what are you watching, man? Like I've watched every game that Clemson played. He was benched in 2 games. Like, yeah, I get it. He's athletic, but the tape's not good. And people forget that he was like top 5. I remember actually Joe Fan saying, hey, this Miles Murphy guy is interesting. I was like, mate, no, not at 5. No way. He's not good enough. And he lasts to 28, which was what should have happened. Take him there because of the traits and the potential, but not a top 10 pick at all. So I was very happy about that projection. But I do just wonder, based on the traits, could he have still potentially, Robbie, because the Seahawks are quite a traits-based team. But the more we talk about it, I think it's probably likely Christian Gonzalez and then one of Flowers, because his change of direction is unbelievable, and maybe Kincaid. They're the 2 that I'd have a guess at.
Rob, do you think with these articles that there's any chance that, John Boyle, who is a top bloke, like really, really nice guy, he's writing his article in his office, and Pete just pokes his head around the corner and says, would you mind just saying that we had 4 first-round grades left? Because some prick on Les Snead's staff's going to have to read this and work it out and feed it up, and could be really helpful for next year's draft if we can play a bit of draft poker. So just make it 4, if you don't mind. Cheers, pal.
Well, somebody raised this, actually. Somebody did put out there saying, why the hell would the Seahawks tell us anything? Like, if they were, look, he made a good point. I don't think it's right. I think that, there's enough people saying this is the way it was. And, a couple of people who are trustworthy were saying, I don't think the Seahawks are going to take a quarterback at 5 before the draft. So I do believe that aspect of it. But this person made the argument that it was, if they really, really, really wanted Anthony Richardson, are they going to come out afterwards and tell anybody that? Like, no, of course they're not. Of course they never wanted him. We wanted these 2 guys instead. Like, of course you would do that. So is there the possibility that the Seahawks official website is not exactly telling us every single thing that is 100% on here? I think that's probably true, because I must admit, the 2 times I've come away from reading those articles, I felt very upbeat and positive about Seattle's draft, and that's probably what that article is designed to do. But the one thing I did find interesting from it last year was that John Boyle was telling us players they weren't going to take. So, for example, they're not interested in. He was saying something like, that's a player they weren't interested in. He was like, Jermaine Johnson was one of them, and there was another player I can't remember who was taken, and they said they weren't interested in him. He was hinting very much at the players they were interested in, like Tyler Linderbaum and the guard who went to Dallas. So we had a bit of info there of who they liked, and also in this, like, hey, they like Keanu Benson, but not as much as this guy. And when they say Derek Ward, a first round guy, I don't think you can flat out lie about that stuff. I think you can maybe steer your fan base in a different direction. I think flat out lying, like this guy was a 2nd round grade, but let's just say he was a 1st round grade. I don't even think any team would do that. Not even the Niners. No, I'm joking. So I just don't think anyone would do that. But Adam, you make a fair point. Can you trust essentially club PR to give you a complete picture? The answer is no, you can't. Not really. But then can you trust reporters who are connected to the team? Who's ever going to give you journalism's changed. Journalism has changed. And it's harder than ever to really get to the bones of what's happened here. And genuinely in the NFL, you kind of hear what you want to hear, don't you? What the teams want you to hear, or the players and the agents want you to hear. Like Rappaport and Schefter are basically just behest of the teams and the agents. They do the bidding of the agents so much. Have you seen these tweets recently? Like, congratulations to this agent who has just signed this new deal, or well done to this agent for getting it. It's obvious what they're doing. They're buttering up their contacts ahead of the next run of let's try and break stories. So, but overall, Robbie, I thought it was quite interesting to get that bit of insight to send us off into our lull of months with no NFL.
Yeah, if anything, it was a good read. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So we are, 13 minutes away from the roster reveal. And are there any particular games that you are, when you look at that schedule, Robbie, you can dig out who they're playing, even though we don't know the order in which the games are going to go. Is there a game to you that you think, do you know what, I'm either looking forward to that one, or that game stands out, or what? Is there a home and a road game that you really think that way?
I am interested in seeing I know they're playing in Tennessee, so Nashville is not very far away from me. It's about a 4-hour drive, so I'm interested to see when that one is, so I could maybe possibly.
Have you heard the rumor?
Huh?
The rumor is that one's on Christmas Eve.
Oh, great. Great.
I fancied that one, but there's no way that my wife's going to let me. Like, my wife's very flexible, but hey, I'm going to Tennessee for Christmas would not go down well.
Yeah. But I mean,
I was going to go to Nashville with my wife for that weekend, whenever that game was, but it being on Christmas Eve, that is absolutely banjaxed.
Well, they do play in Cincinnati as well, which is also like a 90-minute drive for me. It's super close. So, I mean, those are two that I'm fairly interested in kind of just seeing when the dates are, just so I can possibly, make it over there and go to a game. They do play in Detroit, which is also, I think it's like a 3-hour drive for me, which isn't
Robbie,
too bad.
how far away is Tennessee from you?
Uh, well, Nashville's only 4 hours. I don't know how actually
Okay,
how the
I was
border.
going to
Yeah.
say because I never paired sort of Indianapolis and Nashville as being close.
Yeah, so this is the weird thing about Indianapolis for people who don't know is they call it the crossroads of America, which I never fully understood. I thought it had to do with some sort of racing thing, but it's literally in the center of all these other cities, like right in the middle of Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Nashville, Lexington, Kentucky, like all these places are just super close within less than a day's driving. So, Cincinnati's only like a 9-hour or a 90-minute drive. Cleveland's like a 4-hour drive. Detroit, I think Detroit's like a 5-hour drive, maybe. I'm not really sure, but there's games that are close in the Midwest this year that I'm interested in seeing. And then, I am of course looking forward to getting out and seeing a game or two back home in Seattle since I have season tickets. I actually didn't make it to a game last year, so I would quite like to go to the Eagles game. I think that would be a fun one to attend, and then obviously a Niners game would be fun to go to as well.
Yeah, look, you do realize that Cincinnati, they call it the jungle, Robbie. You better you better take like a musket
I'm ready.
with you or something.
I'm ready.
Like
I'm
a
not
net.
scared.
Like you're
It's funny.
dressed as Indiana Jones or something.
There's quite a few Cincinnati Bengal fans here in Indianapolis. So,
in fact, going as Indiana Jones would be quite apt, given that you live in
right.
Indiana.
Yeah.
Adam, is there a game? Obviously, the Tennessee one was standing out for you originally, but if it is to be on Christmas Eve, where is there another game that you think, oh yeah, do you know what? Love a bit of that. I'll have a bit of that.
It was going to be the Giants, but I think that's going to be Monday Night Football now, which is also a disaster to get to. So it's all gone absolutely Pete Tong for me and my prospective travel plans. But in terms of the actual games, I loved the Kansas game last year because I just like seeing how the team measure up against the best from a barometer standpoint. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the Eagles game and the Bengals game, because I think though, it could in an alternate universe that could easily have been last year's Super Bowl. And I think seeing how this team matches up, especially if we're kind of looking at this year, or I am at least looking at this year as a, where are we going to shape up for next year? I really want to see how far away we are, or otherwise to the consensus best teams out there. Because if we can compete now, then we're going to be in good shape.
That Bengals game scares the crap out of me. That to me just looks like a game. I don't want to put you off, Robbie. 90 minutes. If I was 9 minutes away from a Seahawks game, like it's like 10 hours in a plane for me and Adam. So if I was 90 minutes drive away, I'd be there. Don't worry. But I don't know. That game just. I don't think. I think if I was the Eagles, I wouldn't fancy going to Cincinnati. It's just. There's just so much about that team, isn't there, in Cincinnati that is good. And Burrow's just got that killer instinct, hasn't he? I mean, he's got a lot of that Rodgers cockiness to him without some of the arsehole nature of Rodgers' kind of personality. He has got that born to do this kind of vibe going on. And Adam's right. It will be very intriguing to see how Seattle can go into that atmosphere, Robbie. I think right now I'd take a competitive loss. But I don't want to say that because it's May the 11th. I'm already talking about I'll take the L. I mean, who knows? Burrow might be injured. Like, they may be playing whoever their backup quarterback is. Like, bring it on. Like, who knows what's going to happen between now and whenever that game is. But that's a tough one. And it's a tougher schedule, isn't it, Robbie? When you actually look at, I think, the home games. So the home opponents are obviously the three NFC West teams. You would fancy the Seahawks to beat Arizona and LA. The 49ers won. Who knows? They play the Eagles at home. That's going to be a fantastic game, fantastic atmosphere. I'd love to be at that one as well. I think that one is an absolute belter. But then the others, you'd expect them to have a great chance to beat the Commanders, a great chance to beat the Panthers with a rookie quarterback, quite likely. I don't think the Browns are anything. The Browns can give you a game, but they're nothing to be scared of, are they? And Deshaun Watson looks like he looked crap last year. Looked awful. And you just wonder, after all that's gone on and the fact that he's still been paid an absolute king's ransom, how motivated is he right now to go out there and be, what the Browns want him to be. And then the Steelers, they're a scrappy little. They always are, aren't they? They're a scrappy team, the Steelers. But does Kenny Pickett visiting Seattle as a sophomore quarterback strike any fear whatsoever into you? Not for me. I mean, there's a great chance with that home run, Robbie, to go 7-1. 7-1? Is it 2, 4, 6? Yes, there's 8 home games and 9 road games next year. To go 7-1 is not unrealistic. They probably aren't going to go 8-0. They probably will drop at least 1 home game, if not 2. And often they will drop a game that you least expect them to. But there's a chance there, isn't there, Robbie, to have a great run at Lumen Field next year?
Yeah, I think 6-2 is probably more realistic. Could squeak at 7-1, but I think 6-2 is probably realistic looking at the schedule and the fact that they always seem to just drop one that you're just like, what the hell? Why do we lose this? But yeah, then you look at that. I mean, that's why I said you could easily find yourself in the playoff hunt pretty early on. It's the away games that are going to be a lot harder for sure when you start looking at the schedule there.
Well, let's have a look at those, Adam. So Cardinals, Rams, Niners. Again, you'd fancy the Seattle team to go to Arizona and LA and have a good chance. But Niners, again, always a tough one. They have to go to the Cowboys, the Giants, the Ravens, the Bengals, the Lions, and the Titans. As much as you can find a lot of encouragement from that home slate, it's also not beyond the realms of possibility that the Seahawks only win 2 of those games. I mean, that is a really difficult run, isn't it? They are going to have to lean on the home stuff and hope that they can pinch a few of those games, because that's a battle and a half. I think they can go to Dallas and New York and win. I think they can go to Baltimore and Detroit and Tennessee and win. But actually doing it, Adam, is the hard part. It's tough.
Yeah, all of those games are going to be the ones where if they do win, you're going to see Pete Carroll sort of hanging off the top of a locker, going ballistic in his post-game speech with his shirt off and his trousers down, whipping everyone up into...
Yeah, you don't need to see that, Pete. You're a man in your 70s. Keep your trousers off.
Have some dignity, man, for goodness sake. You're a grandfather. But, it would be one of those kind of games in one of those ridiculously small lockers where everyone's going bananas and headbutting each other and having the time of their lives. The thing is that the home form has not been good in the last few years. Where it used to be sort of a automatic 7-1, 8-0 at the time when Wilson started out at home. They've not been that dominant home team in the last 3 or 4 years. But when you look at how the schedule does shape up this year, they're going to have to be good at home, because it's going to be a heck of a slog to go on all those road games and come away with many more than 3 or 4 wins. You wouldn't have thought.
So we're 4 minutes away from the schedule actually being revealed, and we will bring that to you here. We'll give you a quick reaction and then off to bed because it's late. What are we feeling here? I mean, I'm looking at this. I think if you're going to do a prediction, and obviously it's way too early to do predictions, but we're going to do them anyway. You have to look at the schedule and you have to sort of actually consider the opponents rather than just plucking a number out of thin air. I think the Seahawks, I agree with Robbie, probably 6-2 is probably more realistic than 7-1, because the chances are they will drop a game that you don't expect them to. And they've got to play the Niners and the Eagles. Even if they win one of those 2 games, it's not beyond the realms of possibility they'll lose to the Browns or the Steelers or the Panthers or the Commanders or something like that. So we'll go 6-2 at home just to be conservative with it. I'm going to say that they'll get to looking at the away schedule. I don't think they're going to win the majority of their games there. I'm going to say 9 or 10 wins next year based on the schedule. I think that's fair. I think some people will, I've seen somebody's commented on my blog in the comment section that like 13 wins was the ceiling. I think that's very, very ambitious. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying 9 or 10 wins. And I think if they get that, they'll be in the playoffs. And I think that they will be going into next off season, as we've spoken about, feeling like, one off season now to put the finishing touches to this roster and go for it. So that's my guess with 2 minutes to go into the schedule. Robbie, have you got a number?
Yeah, 9 or 10 sounds good. I think you could squeak 11 just depending on how the it plays out on the road, but I think 9-10 makes the most sense.
Adam?
Very boring to be consensus, but I won't even go or I'll go 10-7 on the proviso that they maintain a decent level of health, because whilst they do like they could have a good team, you'd be slightly concerned if they had picked up a couple of injuries in positions where they can't afford them, and the house of cards could potentially take a bit of a calypso collapso. But I'll go 10-7.
Okay, 10-7 from Adam. So we've all kind of gone for 9-10 wins in that kind of range. So we'll have a look.
Yeah, take up the last minute here just because I want to push this guy some more, and I'm starting to really buy into him. Okay, so if you haven't looked up Robert Cooper on Twitter yet, which by the way, Twitter is a cesspool of terribleness, but his Twitter account's pretty fantastic. He goes by Trench Monster, and
With Twitter account.
His Twitter account is Trench Monster 1. He's a beast, man. Watch some of his highlight videos and watch his leading up to the draft. He did it with your guy. What's your guy's name? The lineman that you really liked. Oh shoot, name's skipping me now.
What, an interview?
No, like the leading up to the draft. He did it with another guy, another player that was going to be drafted.
I've seen this. I've got it saved on my thing to watch. Let me go and dig it out. I'll find the name for you because people might want to watch it. I've got it saved.
No, it was.
Hang on, I'm going to get it now because I've got it saved on my watch later list. So I'm having a look. Chandler Zavala.
Yeah, Chandler Zavala. There you go. There it is. That's it. Yeah. He does they do this. People are asking me to post I'll post his Twitter account on the comments here, so you guys.
Well, they need a trench monster, Robbie. So this sounds perfect.
Anyways, I'm telling you, this guy is not something to sleep on. I know he's an undrafted free agent, but there's videos of him when he was 15, bench pressing 225 30 some times. This guy's an animal. Okay, he's gonna be something. So, anyways, take the last minute to push Robert Cooper. He's my undrafted free agent. Watch for the rest of the year.
Okay, so here we go.
Klaxon, get the flights booked, Rob Staton, November 23rd, week 12. San Francisco 49ers visit your Seattle Seahawks.
What?
I'm gonna share the screen so that we can see this. And here we go. Can you all see that, guys?
Can see
there
it.
We are. So we have the schedule. So it is the Rams in week 1, the Lions in week 2, that first 10 a.m. start. That's a road game. So at home to the Rams, that's a good chance to get a winning start, guys. The Lions a good early test in week 2. Then they host the Panthers in week 3. I mean, look, that for me, and then obviously the Monday Night Football against the Giants. That's a first good month of the season, guys. There's some winnable games there to get a bit of momentum early into the season. A week 5 bye is not ideal. But then they go to the Bengals in week 6. That's another 10 a.m. start. Cardinals and Browns off the back of the Bengals game at home. So a chance if they do lose to the Bengals, who knows, then maybe a chance to get a bit of momentum back into that. They go to the Ravens for a third 10 a.m. start in week 9. Then back at home to face the Commanders. Then off to LA. So none of these games are prime time. But then they have the Thanksgiving game that they were talking about, which I will be attending. And I'm going to get off this stream as soon as possible now so I can book my flights. So Thanksgiving game for that, ahead of the Apple Cup at the weekend. And then back-to-back. So Tyler Lockett mentioned this on Twitter, back-to-back Thursday night football games. So they're playing the Niners on the Thursday, and then they're playing the Cowboys on a Thursday night football game, which is in Dallas. So that is very, very exciting. It almost makes me want to fly from Seattle to Dallas and watch the heck out of that game as well. And then they'll play the Niners on the road after a bit of a break. So that's the good thing. The back-to-back Thursday night things. Obviously, they've got 4 days between the Rams and the Niners. But then they will go and have a week to play the Cowboys and then have almost like a mini bye there, which is going to be quite good, isn't it? So was that a 10-day bye? Yeah, 10-day break between the Cowboys and the Niners rematch. So they can play the Niners twice in 3 weeks. And then Eagles on the 17th. Titans is Christmas Eve, the fourth 10 a.m. game. And then New Year's Eve, Steelers. And then to be determined, Cardinals on the road to finish. So there you go. I hate it when they play on Christmas Eve. And now I'm going to hate that they're playing on New Year's Eve as well, because a loss, I'm not good at dealing with that.
Yeah.
I mean,
anything stand out?
Yeah, I think it's hard to look past 17-0 now that it's all written down like that, Rob. Scrap 10-7. I think 17-0 looks like it's in the books.
Who's that guy who does the impressions? Like, he's the guy who does the impressions, and he did the schedule release one year, and he had like he can't do the John Gruden impression anymore. But he was like looking at it, he was like going, win, 17-0, man. That was a brilliant thing. That was brilliant. That was about 3 years ago now. Yeah. Anything stand out to you, Robbie?
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed the Eagles game is so like late in the season. I was hoping to be a little earlier to get back home. I think the 17th might be tough for me to get home, especially with the holidays being the following week. So that's a bit of a pickle. But other than that, I mean, the back-to-back Thursday is not my favorite. But they do have that long break, so I guess that is nice. And then I am bummed that the Tennessee game is Christmas Eve, because that's going to be tough to make as well. So.
Yeah. So Frank Caliendo, he's a great impersonator, absolutely fantastic. And like I say, it's just a shame that he can't do that Gruden impression anymore because he's persona non grata now. But yeah,
I do think people like to moan, or some players have been moaning about back-to-back Thursdays, but I think you'd rather have Sunday, Thursday than 2 sets of Sunday, Thursday in the season.
Agreed. Like, unless you can
Thursday is just Sunday with different names.
Absolutely. I think this is fair enough. Like Thursday, the back-to-back Thursday sounds like you're playing back-to-back off a 4-day break, but it's not like that at all, is it? You've got the Thursday, then you've got a week, and then you've got a big break. 10 days. I actually think it's quite good. So there we go. There's the schedule. I think it's an interesting schedule. It's funny though, isn't it? Really, because we all knew who they were going to bloody play. It's not a surprise. It's not like they sprung a surprise. I mean, we all knew who they were going to play. It was just the order in which they were going to be playing the games. But I think there's a chance there to go into the bye week with a winning record after the first 4 games. Off the back of that, if you split it into chunks of 4, the next 4, you've got 2 tough road games, but you've got two winnable home games. So, if you can split that, you're still in a winning record position there. Going into the next quarter where you play the Commanders, the Rams, you host the Niners, and you get to the Cowboys. Could you win that series of 4 games? Yes, you can, and then you're on the home stretch. The Niners and the Eagles back-to-back weeks, great test. The Titans, who knows where they're going to be by then? Are they going to be turned into Will Levis by that point? Are they going to be trying to go in a different direction? They crumbled a bit, the Titans, at the end of last year, didn't they? After a strongish start. So is that going to happen again? Steelers on New Year's Eve. I suspect there might be a few lubricated voices on New Year's Eve for that one, which might help the home crowd. Yeah. And then you've got a very winnable game to end it. I mean, that Cardinals game in week 18 or whatever it is. Let's not forget that could be we're going to make sure we lose this for a tank. So that could be a great time to play the Cardinals. In fact, every week might be a good time to play the Cardinals next week. I don't know what I'm saying. So
it's true.
So pretty good. So there we go. There's the schedule. Adam's called it 7-0. I've knocked my light over, clapping my hands. So there we go. Thank you to everybody who has been watching. Just a quick note as well to say that my interview with Jim Nagy is coming tomorrow. Good half an hour chat with Jim talking about the class for the Seahawks. Some great stories. He's got a couple of good little nuggets there that, conversations that he had with John Schneider during the Senior Bowl and on draft day that, isn't public knowledge, that he's not going to share as they're going on, but he did share with us in this interview. So I'd check that out. It's going to be really interesting. That's coming tomorrow. Interview with the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy. Great to speak to Jim again. Make sure you like the video. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think about the schedule and the state of the Seahawks right now. Make sure you subscribe. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. Big thank you to the legends that are Robbie Williams and Adam Nathan as well. Until next time, bye for now.